Hello, everybody. Welcome to another demo of the work that Evernym is contributing to Sovrin and to Indy. And now we contribute to Aries, too. So we'll be including that more and more. We're doing this a day early. Hopefully this gets posted on YouTube a day early because tomorrow is the American 4th holiday, and I'm going to be relaxing, even though my Russian colleagues will be working on a release. So thank you for your diligence while I'm relaxing. But we're going to get this video posted so people can benefit. The key thing that we want people to know about is we scheduled a June release, and that June release was delayed. It had significant refactoring, and we found some bugs. We've also hit a number of build issues with our CI/CD pipeline. That's split between Evernym, the Hyperledger Foundation, and the Sovrin Foundation, and there were different problems in that process, and it took a while to resolve. But we're finally on track to have that release complete. We hope it's completed this week, so I appreciate everybody working while I'm enjoying a day off. And it might be early next week, but it's at this point we expect it to be this week. We found some additional issues last minute, but those are resolved at this point, or on track to be resolved. So that release includes both the Indy-Node and Indy-SDK. And you'll see more, we'll go through that release in more detail probably in the next sprint demo. But on the Indy-Node side, the main thing is that we refactored the way ledger plugins work for the Sovrin token. So it's going to be easier to maintain. There's a cleaner separation between the plugin and the handler of the plugin. They're more pluggable. In addition to that release, there's a whole bunch of work there. There's some cleanup work for, we removed the idea of a trust anchor. We renamed that to an endorser. We removed anyone can write now that we have auth rules, and we have a bunch of bug fixes. So that'll be nice. On the Indy-SDK side, we also have some significant improvements. In this release, the biggest improvement is credential tagging or improved credential tagging, attribute tagging that was contributed by the government of Canada, and we're excited for that. But in addition, there were a few bug fixes and other improvements in that release. Improvements to make batch automation easier. You can have yes respond to all the responses. You can exit. Improvements to logging, things like that. So we expect that release out fairly quickly. On the and the attached token releases are also included there. We're calling this token release 1.0. We believe the token's ready for use. Of course, that's not our decision. The Sovrin network governance is evaluating the token. They're going to look at our work. There's a collection of stewards and an ecosystem that have to decide whether they agree with us. So that's the key thing there is we think we're pretty happy with the work we've done. We're proud of what we've done, but another set of stakeholders now needs to look at it and decide whether that's something that should be put onto public networks. So that includes the plugin refactor and a number of bug fixes there. As we move into July, because this is finishing up the June work, the goal is going to be to improve that token to make it more usable. And we've identified a number of improvements we want to do. We released the transaction author agreement in June, but one of the items there is that we wanted to include a date time for when the user accepted the transaction author agreement. That date time would allow people to allow us to, if somebody disputes the rules of the ledger, of the public ledger, we can say, no, you accepted on a specific date. But because we use the date time, that's correlatable. It could allow you to tie together various DIDs and payment addresses. So we're going to change that to just take the date. That's going to be part of the July release. We're also going to improve the way UTXOs work. If you have lots of unspent transactions on the ledger, we'll add paging there. We'll talk about that more next release, next sprint, actually, sprint demo in 2 weeks. And we're going to improve the way that you can query the ledger for fees to make it easier for people to build applications. We also expect in the next release to have some nice improvements contributed by other teams. The Evernym application team is working to enable agency-independent credential proofs. So libvcx will allow direct connections, will not rely on the agency. We expect that to be in the July release. We know that's been a frequent request. We hope that makes people happy. And then we hope that people are happy with that work. And then the Mike Lauder at the Sovrin Foundation, he's been improving the way that payment addresses, you prove possession of a payment address, and other types of proof of possession queries. So that'll be included. And then we have tab completion in the Indy-CLI. We're gonna make the Indy-CLI easier to use and less error prone. So that's the main goal going forward, is these usability improvements. We think that'll be really nice for people. Now I have talked too long. The mainnet upgrade for the June release was completed last week. We had some challenges with the mainnet upgrade. It's when we've rolled the token code out to mainnet. It's not usable. There are no fees enabled. There's no tokens minted. Those are all decisions that have to be approved by network governance. But the code is there to ensure that it doesn't cause problems that we're confident. And what that does is it allowed us to bring mainnet, Sovrin mainnet in alignment with Sovrin BuilderNet and Sovrin StagingNet. The token code went to those networks last November. So these have not been in perfect alignment for quite a while, and we're really excited to bring them back into alignment. As part of that process, that was a tricky upgrade. We wanted to make sure that the packages were right and we'd have correct updates. We do the deployment to the Sovrin networks with a Sovrin Debian package that brings in all the dependencies, and that depended on the token plugins, which of course haven't been on mainnet. And so that Sovrin Deb was very out of date, and some of those were really out of date. When we went and checked, I don't know, some of these stewards had not updated that package since 2017. There were a couple stewards that were that old, and we were very nervous of those updates having problems. So we did some special hand-holding there. While we were doing that process, we also noticed that there were some stewards who had really far clock skew. They were days behind the rest of the pool, and that might explain some of the odd behavior we've been seeing when we've had a hard time tracking down strange view changes or losses of specific nodes being non-responsive if their clocks are that bad. So that's all corrected as well. So mainnet's updated, and we're feeling really good about that. So those are the news items I wanted to share. As for today's, again, we keep the demo log in the demo agenda in the Indy Wiki, so that it's easy for people to search and query what's been going on and find previous videos. So we're going to have Sergey Minaev. He's going to discuss the work we've done thinking about how Aries and Indy should relate. A lot of the Indy functionality is supposed to move into Aries, and how should that look? We're trying to figure out the right places for us to contribute. So he's going to talk about that. And then Sergey Khoroshavin has been leading our effort to implement an improved view change. That we're going to add move from our strange type of view change to the PBF the algorithmic the PBFT view change that's discussed in the research papers, and with some improvements. And then Artem's going to discuss a key fix he did that had it was pretty bad. We had nodes crashing, so that'll be important to go through. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let you, Sergey, take over.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to talk about our aggregation issue. So you now should see my screen, and the reference issue is 1285. You can find a short description here and some useful comments at the bottom. One of the comments contains the link to the Google Doc, and this Google Doc is our initial place for discussion to share our first vision of our team. And the second link is a link to Aries call agenda there we have first public discussion of this proposal, and with some recorded feedback from other teams, other contributors to Indy. So let me switch to the proposal itself. Firstly, I would like to point out that it's not a final decision. It's not something that Evernym would like to push to only this solution as only the right one, but we just would like to start a conversation about this topic. So, in fact, we have two active ongoing activities now. The first one is just Indy-SDK 2.0. This topic was raised maybe a year ago because we have a lot of nice to have features. Some of them are breaking changes from API point of view. And it's the reason why it should be called Indy-SDK 2.0. And we also have some ideas to global changes inside Indy-SDK. And at the same time, not at the same time, but now we have an Aries project actively developed, actively establishing, and for sure we have to synchronize these two activities. So let me start from goals for both of the projects, and then trying to understand there is an intersection between them. So from Indy-SDK 2.0, we have different goals. For example, we would like to improve our threading model, how we work in multi-threading models for different applications, for different use cases. Also, there was a long-term topic and long-term discussions how language-specific wrappers should be organized. As you may know, in current code base of Indy-SDK, we have some wrappers in different languages, and all these code base, libIndy itself, and the language wrappers are stored at the same repo. Sometimes it's useful, sometimes it produces several problems, and for sure we would like to improve the situation in Indy-SDK 2.0 or in Aries project. And it seems like we would like to have not just language wrapper. We would like to have language-specific wrapper, which will be idiomatic to the language and use the power of the language. And at the same time, we would like to have just bindings from the C callable API to the wrapper to the language primitives. And it's a vision for Indy-SDK 2.0. And we have more goals like improve modules inside Indy-SDK. For example, some application maybe wanted to use just wallet or just ledger connection or just uncreds without anything else. So it's also a good topic for further improvement of SDK. And of course, we have very interesting part of our SDK, I mean libv6. And it's just next level of abstractions. So we have libIndy as low-level library and with good flexibility, but hard to consume API. And we have libv6 with good enough flexibility, but of course a bit less than libIndy. And it's much easier to consume. And we are going to probably merge these two libraries into Indy-SDK 2.0 or have different approaches, but it's definitely a topic for discussion. And for sure, we would like to improve supporting of agent-to-agent flows in our libraries. And the last one, the most discussable topic is hardware secure enclaves. The problem here is we can use some hardware enclaves for storing just simple signatures, like the ID-based signatures. It's pretty clear how to implement it. But at the same time, the main feature of the Indy is verifiable credentials and unencrypted logic. And for now, we didn't see any hardware implementation which are maybe useful for unencrypts. And that's why these topics under hard discussion, because implement just the ID-based signature in hardware manner, but keeping unencrypted only software secure enclaves, it seems like half a solution and not so useful. So it's a discussion topic. And from Aries point of view, we have sometimes similar goals like agent-oriented API or modularization. But from Aries point of view, modularization seems like Aries should be definitely independent from ledger implementation. And it's one of the possible ways for Aries evolution is have Aries code base independent from a ledger implementation, but have an ability to implement resolver to a specific network. And if our ecosystem will grow in this way, it means that Indy-SDK becomes just an Indy resolver, and the main logic will be moved from libindy to libaries. And here you can see some community vision how Aries releases can be issued and what states for them. I think that's it about two different activities, two initiatives. And let me briefly describe one of the possible way how it can be developed together. So our team prefer to have, yeah, go ahead.
Just make sure people are aware. So this was discussed quite thoroughly in the Aries working group call. You can see those recordings in the Hyperledger wiki. And so we'll provide a really brief overview here, but most of that discussion is in the Aries working group. So you can go get more detail there.
Yeah, thank you. So we think that the first topic for the next step is design how network resolver API should be implemented. So it will be the main point between Indy-SDK and Aries, and between Aries and another resolver. I think it's a major next step. The second one may be actual migration of code base of libindy and other Indy-SDK to Aries SDK. Seems like we'd like to move wallet, to move unencrypted and other stuff. And the next steps are about how to fetch very useful high-level API from libv6 and high-level functions and move it to libaries. And the next one is how to deal with wrappers, with bindings between libraries. And what about new functionality in Aries? For example, you can find a lot of RFCs about some decorators in agent-to-agent flows, and it seems like it's nice to have them in Aries library. And at the bottom of this document, you can find some discussion topics which are most actual now. So like, we like to have different CLIs between Aries and Indy. We would like to have C API or Rust API between Aries and network resolver, and how to deal with hardware encryption, how to deal with payments, and so on, I think. That's it, and just to remind that link to this document you can find in the original ticket, 1285 in the comments. And this document is available for commenting for everyone who has a link to it. That's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergey K.
Okay, let me share my screen. Today I'm going to talk about testing approach that we are using when implementing new view change protocol. Well, actually it's not view, it's not new, it's just proper PBFT view change protocol. One may asked how can we be sure that in quite well in a relatively short period of time, how can we be sure that new view change protocol is tested, because protocol itself is quite complex, I could say. And of course, we are going to cover it with unit tests, with integration tests, and we are going to run load tests. But this time we decided to try a new approach at larger scale. We had some previous experiments with this approach, but this time it has somewhat larger scale. It's called property-based testing. The main idea behind property-based testing is that instead of writing unit tests that take some specific conditions, specific values, we just define some properties and then feed the test some random values from some random but valid values. So there is some simulation test that I wrote, which checks that if we have some pool of arbitrary size, well, actually from 4 to 8 nodes, and that if we schedule a view change on all nodes, then the view change will finish and all nodes will have well, same state. And now this test tries 1000 different examples of initial state, and all examples are pass now. Well, actually, I was a bit cheating here because view change starts on all nodes. View change starts almost at the same time. If I put here more random values, then we will see that some examples are failing. This is due to incomplete implementation of PBFT view change protocol as of now, but we are improving, and this single test can show a lot, and it can be run much faster and much cheaper than load tests that we ran previously to catch some hard to find bugs. But now it can be done just in your IDE, and this test runs in CI. And one thing that made these tests that made it possible to run this test so fast is that in a new code we are injecting time, we are injecting network, so it's real simulation test. So, for example, if you look at SimNetwork Plus, it's just network simulation. We can see that it just passes some messages between simulated nodes with random latencies, and so we can have any latency. It can be 1 second, 1 hour, 1 day, and however, in simulation test will take as little time as possible. One might also ask, if we use some random data, how can we reproduce these results if for example, if something fails in CI? And the answer is that in our random generator we use a fixed seed. So if test fails locally, it will certainly fail on CI and vice versa. And it will fail on every run, and it will fail the same way. Just to demonstrate this, we can see that out of 1,000 examples, only 393 tests passed, and we can run this again, and we will see the same number. Another thing that I wanted to talk about while the test is running is that actually there are some frameworks for property-based testing out there, and most notable one is Hypothesis. But unfortunately, due to Hyperledger licensing policy, we cannot use this framework, at least not in CI. Actually, one of the reasons why we had an abstract sim random interface is that we implemented, we created another implementation of this interface for using hypothesis generators, which have more features like minification of failing examples or shrinking, and but we cannot use it directly. So that's all from me.
Excellent. I apologize, Artem, that we are almost out of time. We have another meeting bumping up on this one, but you've got about 3 minutes.
Yep, sure. I will try to be quick. So welcome, everyone. Let me share my screen. Is it okay?
Yes, looks good.
Well, okay. I'm going to tell you about one problem that we faced on one of our networks, which was about crashing, a node crashing, and the good mention that it was pretty strange exception, because this exception intend to be thrown to catch some invalid fields and other such validation things. So the problem that we faced here, that this exception wasn't catched by try block. This was by this traceback, we can see that it was faced in a propagate phase. Let me tell you just brief and explain what was happened. The thing was that user sent upgrade request, and the situation was that one part of node validate this, accepted and validated this request, and another one did not. When requests go to one part of node and another, one part answered by recnac and other answered reply. For the ones who answered recnac, they got validation failed in the request handling phase, and it was wrapped by try code. But the part of nodes that which accepted this request and passes the validation, it started to send propagate with this request inside, and we have another logic to check that request inserted in propagate is valid. So we tried to validate request which was in propagate, and it was revealed that for forced request we have no try block here. That was hard to catch in a test phase because we had we almost had no test which where nodes differs in validation results. Well, and this is where the validation faults. It did not catch by try block, and we got not failing. So this was fixed pretty easy. We make some additional validation and make some proper answer in process request and process propagate, as you can see here. Yeah, for process propagate and for process request, and additional validation to handle enforced requests. Also, we've covered it with tests here with just usual forced request, and for our specific case with upgrade in a node side. And the problem was resolved. Thank you for attention.
Thank you. It's really helpful to see how the specific portions of the protocol are put together. So some of these bugs are really useful there. With that, thank you very much, and we'll end this recording, and we'll post another video in 2 weeks. Thanks.